You are listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. Creator and host, Ken Vellante. Editor and producer, Peter Bauer.
Hach Sachel Twol Galapu de Ishan de Sayaya Chalup Paige Pettibon Seedsta Tol Alchud Salish Ali Washitubsh. Good day to all of you, all of my friends, all of my relatives. My name is Paige Pettibon. I'm based in Tacoma, Washington. Thank you for listening to Something Rather Than Nothing. I'm guest hosting for Ken Vellante, and for this episode, we are having an artistic and philosophical conversation with the talented, lovely, beautiful Calina Lawrence. Hadoop, Calina! Welcome to the show. Could you please introduce yourself?
He's Hot Slachel, Calina Lawrence, Seedsta, Soak Chad, Tol All Chadu Suck as Slachlil Chad T, Alti Och Lats, as Quadid of Chad, as Quadid to Booslet Chad Alti Slachel. Thank you so much, Paige. Good day. My name is Calina Lawrence. I am Suquamish. I come from the place of the clear salt water, and I live in Flats, which is a Suquamish village known as Maple Grove, or Land of the Maples, colonially known as Paulsbo, Washington. And I'm very grateful, super grateful for everybody here, and thankful to be here today with you, especially Paige.
He's cool. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on today. So I'm going to start with the first question. Were you an artist when you were born?
I love this question because I've never been asked this question before, which makes it so exciting to answer and to reflect on this answer. So I first want to say that, especially thinking of my parents and getting to know my parents throughout my lifetime, they're definitely creative people. So I feel like I was born with creativity, like inherited creativity. And being a creative person, obviously, tends to develop into identifying as an artist, right? Not always, but I definitely feel like I was born with the ability to be creative. And I think I was born into an environment, and I found myself in many environments where art and different art forms became my mode of expression. So if you combine my creativity with different art forms, then yeah, I would say I was born an artist, or I was born with the ability to become an artist, if that makes sense. And I feel like just where I was born, which is in Suquamish, there's just so much beauty and natural beauty from the earth and the land and all the beings that exist here. So I was able to identify, right, like what is art? What's art all around us, and what's happening as art, and how to create art. So yeah, I don't know. I also like to say that at different parts of my life, different artistry within me was born, right, at different ages. So I always say, like, for music, especially my birthplace for music, or my music career, was in the Bay Area in Ohlone territory when I was about 22. That's where I would consider myself born, like, as a professional musician. But I've been singing my whole life, so I don't know. It's it gets deep in terms of like how many layers we want to peel back. But I was definitely born a creative person. I will say that.
I really love that answer. I think that it allows room for rebirth And
Mm.
and I think as a a Lushootseed culture, that's something that we have is when we listen to stories or observe art or sing songs, they have different meanings for us throughout our life. And art is part of that, and within us. I would say for myself too, I had a rebirth of art when I was 25 and I became sober and I just focused on art and it grew, right? So I definitely can relate with you and your, music rebirth in
Yeah.
the area. I love that. That's such a great answer.
Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So let's talk about your art. I was listening to your music on repeat, and I noticed that you have a lot of personal information and you're so vulnerable. And I was just wondering, how do you create in that state of being? And what is that like for you? And what responsibility is that? Or is it a responsibility?
Hey, he's cool. First, I just want to say thank you for listening. I mean, from just off top, like anytime someone takes the time out of their lives and their days to listen, it's just a couple minutes, but like the amount of hours and really the whole lifetime that goes into creating a 2 or 3 minute song is like, it means a lot to me when you intentionally take that time to listen. So I really appreciate that. And then a step further, right? When you really allow yourself, as someone who's receiving this information, to ask more questions and to explore what's coming up for you or what your interpretation of it is, right? That also is very validating as an artist and as, like you said, someone in a place of vulnerability where, what I consider art or why or how I use art is especially to exercise my mind, to, I would say, grow as a decision maker, to make sense of what's happening in my life or what has happened, or to visualize what could happen, right? All these kind of tenses that exist, and to establish a path toward empathy. So as a former foster youth, I always start with this idea of being in a position of either advocating for myself or not being advocated for. And when we talk about this vulnerability, especially with my music, it comes from a place of needing to find a way to express myself so that I'm understood by folks who are either unable to understand or committed to misunderstanding. And right. So for me, truth is a vulnerable place to be, and it's a necessary place to be. And I've been really fortunate to lead a life of truth, and with that comes the responsibility of vulnerability and of representation. So when I was younger, so when we kind of backtrack to like the birthplace of my music career, because I would like to identify as a multimedia artist with different art forms, right? But when you talk about music, a lot of my earlier years of expression was through poetry. And I really didn't have the skills and the tools to write music yet. until I was about 22. And so during that time, I had this 22 years of lived experiences like built up without a structure to release and express it in like a very specific way. And until I learned songwriting and intentional like lyricism. So I think the vulnerability came through as a truth that was sitting like on my vocal cords for a really long time and just had to exit my body. Had to exit my mind through my vocal cords. And so as I've grown and gotten older, sometimes I think back like, oh, should I have said that? Or should I have written that? Or, like, was that too much? Were people ready for that? But the truth is that, it came out when it needed to, how it needed to. And I had to trust myself that was the message that was supposed to, to come of an idea or an emotion. And I feel like, especially within our Indigenous communities, a lot of times we are processing from generations of lots of emotions, lots of teachings, lots of learned and unlearned behaviors. And vulnerability isn't always a part of that. Vulnerability isn't always encouraged or celebrated. And I think being able to have music as an avenue to nurture that and reclaim that and encourage that is also a responsibility, right? It could be a safe space for that to happen on the level of being a creator and on the level of being an audience member and a receiver. So that's a very long answer to, I think, your question, but I just want to always honor what's happening intuitively. And if I'm always letting my intuition lead, even if it means saying very personal things or saying very difficult things, my intuition is guiding me. So
I love that so much. You hit on so many points that I think of as someone who is Indigenous, someone who is creating artwork for the public. And I personally give a lot of talks as well. And thinking about recording, right? So pre-contact, our records were oral or, on baskets or tapestry. And so recording music is somewhat kind of like a new thing. And then there's the performance aspect too, which delivers something else that it evokes a moment and enables change and progression that sometimes recording doesn't always. And so I wonder, how does that fit into your practice, and like being someone who listened to your music that was pre-recorded, and someone who had the pleasure of you coming and being a guest speaker for the Native Pathways program at Evergreen when I was a student there, and you came in and you sang for us and performed for us, and you also enlightened us and shared with us and shared space with us. And it's just so interesting as someone who consumed both forms. I feel like there's a deep honesty in both the recorded and a deep honesty in the performance part. They're very connected, very connected. I was shocked when I listened to your music, and I was like, this is like, this is brutally honest and it reaches all spaces. So I was just like, I was taken back by your vulnerability, to be honest. And I just felt so encouraged myself to be vulnerable too. I think that program really helped me be vulnerable in also reclaiming that type of mindset, right? Like, I have the right to be vulnerable in all spaces. And how to handle that. I mean, I just, yeah. How did you get to that point? Like, how do you get your mindset to be ready to perform and to record, and how do you get that to translate in both forms?
He's cool. I would love to first acknowledge this very true this very true observation you have made. It's so interesting. One of the questions I get asked a lot, is like, when did you start singing, or when did you start performing? And if I think about it, I've been performing my whole life, right? When I think about it, my dad has this story of me standing on the back of the couch. I couldn't even speak a recognizable language yet. And I was, singing and performing for them, right? I was 2-3 years old. As I was growing up, I was very blessed to have access to different types of musics and different cultural musics, Coast Salish musics, right? And some contemporary genres of musics, other indigenous types of musics that are not necessarily ancestral to the Pacific Northwest, but are very much practiced here, such as powwow music, Northern and Southern, and also peyote and NAC music. So I grew up like singing a lot, and I would sing in person. When we're on tribal journeys and we're all jamming out, that's performing, like, really, when we think about it. And we descend, right, from performers, lifetimes of performers. So when you talk about this difference and connection between being in person and performing for one another, and recording, and the intimacy and the skill that it takes to be a recording artist, is very real, and is something that I'm still honestly navigating. When I'm, in a room full of, couple thousand people, or when I'm on a Zoom with 50 other people, it's pretty like just second nature to share, to sing, to speak. When I'm in a studio with one engineer and it's only me and the microphone and the engineer, I really have to zone in and take myself to a different place, and also not, like, it's this balance of being very mindful but not hypercritical of myself and the take that I'm going to do and the energy I'm going to bring. And, being able to feed off of the people who are in a room with me when I'm performing, versus just me and the mic. It's just me, my truth, my voice, this mic, the press play, the press stop button. It's like, it is very different. And for me, just recognizing the medicine that each hold, right? Because there is something about having this pre-recorded piece of intentional decision making offered at your fingertips, and you can listen to it over and over and over and over again. But when I'm doing a live show, you can't be like, oh, can you do that one again? It goes from like the vibrations of the room to, just the state that the listener is in. So there's all these different factors. And I have grown to appreciate both settings. I I think as many of us as artists, we have our moments of solitude. We have our moments of collaboration, right? So performing live is such a collaboration. There's so much happening and everyone's involved. Every person, the person on the stage, the person in the audience, the person at the sound booth, the person at the door who's greeting everyone, the first face they see when they come through the door. There's all this collaboration happening, and then, just kind of, again, like following that intuition and trusting in the energy of the space that's being held. For me, just really learning over the years about honoring where people are at because of the depth of some of my lyrics and the topics, the heaviness of the topics, which feels heavy, but it's also our truth, and as Indigenous peoples, and for me as a Coast Salish woman, I don't have a choice but to navigate these very real, very true, and very sometimes overwhelming realities that we're living through on a daily basis, right? And if music can't be a place for me to address and identify that, then where is, right? If beadwork can't be a place for me to address and identify, then where would be? And so, I just kind of have to come from a place where, I believe in my ability to represent the life I've lived. And if I'm always coming from a place where I believe in that ability, then that's the only choice that's going to channel through, no matter what setting the music is being shared. And I just feel really grateful for the outlet and for the processing, because I know that there are so many of our people who don't have that quite yet. And the goal is always to, just introduce ourselves and introduce other people to these spaces where this energy happens and this healing happens and this truth telling happens. And then the celebration also happens, and the curiosity also happens, and the encouragement, right? The unspoken permission is taking place for all of us to just explore that whatever that train of thought that is like introduced to us, for us to explore that and take what we can,
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. And so I have some inside scoop because I was going to be part of this show. But your birthday's coming up and you were going to have a celebration, and we're postponing it. But I wanted to give space for you to reflect, if you'd like to share on that reflection of that process and what it means for you to postpone. And, I think what's so interesting is you brought this up too about time and going back in the past, and you having many tenses in your work. And I think as Indigenous artists, we're able to reflect on time not being a linear, a linear concept. And I think a lot of people in America are feeling time differently since the pandemic happened. And so I feel like you're the perfect person to have a reflection about time and this postponed show and your birthday and reflection. I would love to hear your insight on all of that.
Yeah, it's so important. A couple things first that come to my mind and my heart is my love and my prayers continuously go out to everyone affected by this pandemic. So many of us have loved ones who have survived through this. Some of us have loved ones who have not, and each of us are doing what we can to get through each day. And so, to everyone on every single level who is just prioritizing health and well-being, I'm so grateful for. And in addition to that, in terms of this show, right, what this means. So me personally, I have not performed live in, a venue setting or a space setting in just over 2 years now. And so everything went virtual, everything went through Zoom, which I've been, performing for and everything. And it's still been amazing and such a such a blessing to find community in these ways that we're able to. But this particular show, meaning like we're returning, or I would be returning to the stage for the first time, right? Basulatsut, like what does that mean? And for me, when we're talking about the power of in-person space sharing and in-person frequencies and in-person vibrations and the experience of live music, I just knew that I wanted it to be very intentional, very special, and very safe. And this word safe means a lot of things too. So for this particular show is going to be, yes, my 29th winter on Earth. Also my first show since the initial shift in our daily lives, which was March of 2020. And then also my first show since moving back home to the Northwest after spending 7 years in Ohlone territory. So it was like this really like, for me, it was like a pivotal point in my personal life. And so I'm like, okay, as someone who has engaged in different levels of organizing, event organizing, community organizing throughout the last 10 or 15 years, I have to really hone in on the decisions, who's there, what's the message, what are the vibes, who's present, how can we have as many people engaged as possible. I put so much thought into it. And then also a lot of it was just aligning, the community connections with Alma and just, my favorite people who also happen to be artists and then also happen to be my friends too. It just was just such like this thing to look forward to. At the same time, the very realness of this pandemic that we're going through has not stopped. It has not ended. It is still very much at the forefront of our lives. And with folks who have been able to or unable to get vaccinated, it felt like, oh, maybe there's this pocket of time where, we can be as intentionally safe as possible and gather and get this medicine without feeling like so obligated that we want to put people at risk. And for me, in picking the lineup, if you will, in picking the artists who I wanted to share this space with, y'all were my biggest priority. Like, obviously the audience, the attendees, the health of them is so important. But for me, it's like, if even just one of you who I asked personally to be a part of this didn't feel comfortable or had some, just had some doubts or any specific requests, like even if just one of you was not on board to move forward with it, then that was it for me, right? Because I wasn't going to be like, yeah, Paige doesn't really want to do it, but we'll still do it without Paige. Like, no. That's where my mind was. And so checking in with you all to make sure you felt okay with this, and have this kind of unanimous decision was very important. And so the choice to postpone Basulatsu returning to the stage was one in honoring of all of our health, all of our psychological and physical health, right? And immune health. And then also trusting, right? That, it's going to happen, and it's going to happen when it can, and when things align. So being an artist, we have to adapt at all times. Like having the skills to adapt are pretty crucial to a successful creation of any kind. Trial and error, right? And so for me, it's just knowing and trusting that we've all put this intention into this particular space that we want to hold, and it will happen, and it will be just as wonderful and beautiful in 6 months as it would have been, this Friday. And just really like honoring that, right? And so it's bittersweet, of course. There's also this really intentional choice not to go virtual, because that's still not going to be the same effect and the same feel as if it were to have been live in the venue, in the space, with all this art happening, all these different types of art and forms of art happening. So, when we think about this idea of time and our relationship with time, our relationship with planning, our relationship with canceling plans. We're learning so much about acceptance. We're learning so much about adaptability. We're learning so much about control and our relationship with control as well. What's in our control, what's out of our control, how much control do we need? We're just learning so much. And for me, I know, and I've put so much intention into this particular vision and combination of people and elements and art, that it's gonna be incredible when it happens, and it's okay that it's not right now.
I love that. Yes. So for folks who aren't aware, we were going to have a live performance in person at Alma Mater, which is a very cool venue, restaurant, space in Tacoma, Washington. And luckily we have some people there that, they throw shows there, and they were really respectful for our decisions as well too. And Calina was going to have me do a live painting, and I just love how on board you had all of our perspectives be and involved. And I just really appreciate the grace you had in opening up communication for us. And honestly, I feel like your approach really made me feel comfortable with expressing my feelings of postponing, because I want my mom to come, and she might get sick, and I would not be okay with that. So, if I invited her if I put my mom at risk, that wouldn't be good. So I really appreciated you to be really gracious with hearing us out. And I love that. I love that you pointed out, it will happen. And and why we have to do it in person so it hits right? Like
Hey.
that, and the whole like the whole name is To Return to Stage,
Mm-hmm.
and it just wouldn't be authentic if it wasn't happening in real time,
Right.
in shared space. I really,
Yeah. No, and I thank you for acknowledging that, because, you know, we all have different processes, like we're all learning, we're all different kinds of organizers. And for me, yeah, it's my birthday show. It's, you know, however we want to define it. For me, it was just like, it's not just me. It's not just about me. It's about all of us and everyone we have access to and everyone we show up for on a daily basis. And again, in my love and respect for each of you as artists, and kind of this idea of inviting different people from different communities in my, you know, in my life, and different uh but very similar, just fierceness and talent and skill, and talking many conversations with Amber Hayward, who was also like right beside me, helping to envision so much of this space. It just feels like this group of people who is going to be a part of this is such a special intersection that I really want to honor and do the right way. It certainly will be the first, but won't be the last time that all of us, you know, cross paths and collaborate. And what's also really important for me to mention is just that my trust in each of you as artists, and my respect for you all as artists, and my also my like curiosity to introduce some of y'all to each other who might not know each other. There's so much more than just a lineup. It's not just a bill. It's not just here's your 15-minute set, and then, you know, like there's so many moving parts and pieces. And respect that I have for each of you. And I think that it'll be really special when our communities can come to a place together in person and receive the blessings that each of us, you know, will offer, and the gifts that we'll offer. And it's going to be amazing when it happens. And we'll definitely keep all of you posted on the new date. We have not announced that yet, but we just want to make sure that, you know, we're patient and we're accepting, and we're you know, we're kind, and we're helpful, and we're sharing, and we do what we can, and still utilize the space that we have to, you know, keep processing through it. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm gonna ask you, what is art?
What is art? So there's so much possibility to the answer of this question. And when I think about art, I think about intention. I think about decision making. And I think art is very intentional decision making. And I also think art is, I think art is natural. I also think art is organized, and I also think art is applied technique. But when you say the word organized, like it doesn't mean like linear, like we were talking about. It doesn't mean like 1 + 1 = 2. Organized means, you know, we have a way of intentionally making decisions to produce something. And for me, I would say, you know, the art that I create is a release. It is a release of what is constant inside my body and constant inside my mind. So I am taking something that's being held within me and I am emitting it outwardly. I am creating something intentional to be received. Doesn't have to be technically a physical thing you can touch, but it is being received by someone other than myself, and it is assisting my personal journey, right? Like to figure out what is life, what is actually happening, what was yesterday really all about, and how do I make sense of that? So some things that I wrote down: art is words, sounds, silence. Art is vocal, right? Art is poetry. Art is glass, beads, scissors, beading needles, thread, material, right?
Yeah.
Art is the materials that we find in nature. Art is the materials that maybe we manipulate and find some sort of shape or form for, and then we place it somewhere in an organized way that makes sense in our head. Art is cameras, right? iPhones and cameras, Sonys, and all that. Art is communication, which kind of goes along with words. Like, there's just the sheer act of interpretation, how we interpret the world, how we interpret these things that other people have created and offered to us. I also braid hair, so I think braiding hair is art. It's like, whew, that it's deep. Making clothes. I mean, just being human beings and being intentional with whatever materials are at our fingertips, physically and metaphorically, and making sense of this realm that we're in somehow.
I love that. I'm like feeling all my 5 teachers, right? All my 5 teachers are telling me to how to create and how to absorb art in what you're saying. I really like that. I really like that answer, and it's so different from the answer that I had. And it's like, I love how interpretations, right? They can both be right. It's not a binary thing, and I think it's a conversation that continues through time and space.
Well, and there's so much context too. I think context is important. And when I went to college, and we had to really understand what makes something art, like what makes it music, what makes it dance, what makes it theater, what makes it, this label that we place upon it. There's a formula that establishes it as said art form, right? There's also the freedom and the liberation of personal identification and personal definition, personally defining what is art to us. And, there's context. And this is why I think I emphasize so much on decision making, right? Because we're making informed decisions based off of our upbringing, based off of our cultural teachings, based off of our, just the very specific things that make us Paige, that make us Calina, that make us, right, Coast Salish, that make us Salish, that make us Puyallup, or make us Suquamish, or make us, right? There are very specific ways that we do things and instructions that we're given. that shape and form what we create, how we create, and how we define what we create. And so to me, interpretation of the person creating, interpretation of the person receiving, is really so informed from who you are. And the definition, right, is really it's gonna change based off of that person's context. So to me, the only way that I can define art is, just obviously some things happen by accident, but it was still based off of a decision that was made. So
I love that.
It's very intentional decision making.
I love that. So what is the role of art?
I would say, again, processing life as we know it, like exercising our minds, engaging our minds, choosing to be present, choosing to be here, choosing to engage and participate. And again, whether that's the creation of art or the receiving of art, we're participating in this consciousness. We're participating in the being present here and what our role is as human beings. I think it's also documenting. And we talked a little bit about this, right? About, as in many indigenous cultures, and certainly in Coast Salish cultures and Salish cultures, our ancestors have always, always, always documented through various art forms. We said audible, right? We talked about basketry. We talked about artwork, and we talked about, jewelry. And so there's all these ways that our ancestors have always documented our reality, or documented certain eras, documented certain times on Earth that indicated, shift or importance, or just the truth, like what happened. And also we got very creative about documenting life through humor and through metaphors and all these different ways that we're like, yeah, just kind of making sense of things. And so documenting and like we were talking about, right, recording music as like such a new way to refer back and to call upon and draw upon. It's like, okay, how are we, as Nina Simone has so famously been quoted, reflecting the times, right? How are we saying in, 2-3 generations or more down the line, if they want to know what life is like in 2022 Gregorian calendar times, like what was the world like? And all they have is one of Paige's drawings or one of Calina's songs. Like, how are we documenting the world through our eyes, the way we see it, the way we perceive the world? So I think one of the roles of art, obviously, is being very literal about how life is, and being very other than literal about how life is, for us. Yeah. I also think it's establishing space, and I'm not gonna put an adjective in front of the word space. Or I'm not gonna put I'm not gonna describe what kind of space, because I would love to say safe space, but it's not always safe. But art, the role of art is establishing space for this spectrum of emotion that we experience as humans.
Yeah.
And it would be really great if it was always safe. But like I Like, it's not always safe. It's not always fun. It's not always, right? There's not always a description in front of the word space. But what's happening is that space is established to either process or understand or evoke or affirm emotion, human emotion, and what emotions come from, as we're thinking about whatever the art might be. So I think one thing that, I've been taught in different ways from my life experiences is that the ability to feel emotion is what makes us so unique, right? As human beings, and holding and honoring the space for emotion and the spectrum of emotions that we are capable of, and letting them be what they are and how we feel them through this kind of like filter, which is art. Right?
Yeah.
In hopefully a safe way, but not always.
I agree. And I think what you said prior with intention, I think it's our responsibilities as artists to have our intention creating those spaces and processing the human experience. I always look at it as my responsibility to show many facets, right? We can be vulnerable and strong at the same time. And that was something I had to learn, and I had to build those tools. I had to exercise and expose myself how to exercise and use those tools. So like, there's many things that you've said that I definitely am like, yes, you are correct. You're hitting it right. Like, that's exactly what it is. And I think, obviously it doesn't come out perfect, and obviously it doesn't always translate, but those stories are important too in diversing the canon of art and music and, everything. It's important to have that be out there too, and not just one side of the story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So even if they do mess up and not make it a safe space, maybe that is for someone. But I think it's also important to take care of your listener, take care of your viewer, where they're not hurt when they walk away. And there's ways of doing that, I think, right?
Yeah.
I feel like you do. I feel like you're like the queen.
Oh.
You're the queen of it. I was like, how is it that she can say things that are sad, but I feel so uplifted and encouraged and so determined to make my way and path in this way? That's why I feel like we're masters of our own crafts in so many ways as Indigenous people, hitting these intersections. We're always analyzing and processing this experience. So we're masters of living in many different spaces and places, and these intersectionalities and how it feels to be all and none at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to the namesake of this podcast. Calina, why something rather than nothing?
All right. So first off, I have to acknowledge that I'm the type of person who, as a student of language and multiple languages, like, I really love to look up definitions, right? So in preparing for this, I was like, okay, well, first I need to know what's the definition of something and what's the definition of nothing, right? So that we can try to zone in on this question. So one definition I found for the word something is a thing that is unspecified or unknown, right? So that was a definition that I had looked up. for the word something. And then the definition that I had come across for the word nothing is not anything, not a single thing, right? Not a single thing. There's no value. There's no, and so the answer is something, because even though it's unspecified and even though it's unknown, it doesn't mean it's non-existent. But if it's nothing, then that's not true. That's just not true right now. I mean, there's so many things. There's so many somethings here right now, right, for us in our lives and on this earth and beyond this earth. There's so many somethings, and the unknown versus the non-existent, right, is the way that I see, or the way that I would answer this question. There is so much unknown, and there's so many ways to get to knowing, that I think is also why we're artists. And even people who are not artists are still working to get to the place of knowing, right? This place of knowing and this place of learning and this acknowledgement of the unknown, the acknowledgement of not knowing and being okay with not knowing, but still striving toward that something. And recognizing everything that's here, as my really good friend Josh Cocker, who's Kiowa and Tongan, everything that we need is always at our fingertips. Every single thing we need is at our fingertips. And to me, that is this question. That's why something, right? That's why something rather than nothing, because we're forward moving, and we are brave and courageous, brave and courageous enough to even ask a question like this. So I'm gonna choose that, even though it's unspecified and unknown. That's where I want to be, rather than the opposite. So
that's awesome. I love that, because it's like even the something still has the word unknown in it, which could be perceived as nothing. But the way you described it, it's kind of like we've got a basket, and it may be empty or it may be filled with something, and then we fill it up with the unknowns that we want to know.
Hey, yep.
Yeah. Sometimes we empty out that basket, right? And sometimes the emptying process is art. So
exactly.
I mean, I kind of broke my mind thinking about that answer, but your answer, but I think it's pretty beautiful in the way that there's twists and turns, plot twist, right? So is there even nothing to begin with? Probably no, because everything's at our fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that holds a lot of power in the person too, knowing that everything's at your fingertips. Mm-hmm. That, like, I think that just empowered me. Just like, yeah, I have everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I freaking love that. Oh my God.
Yeah, this is shouts out to can you remind me again? So the title of this
podcast is Something Rather Than Nothing, created by Ken Vellante, who is a phenomenal person, and I hope that y'all get to meet sometime, and I'm sure he's going to be so smitten with hearing from you. He's going to reach out. I already know.
That's awesome. And I love
he's so good. He's so diverse with the people he brings on. I just really love his perspective. And these questions are so good. I love how they're so different from being an artist. We get asked the same questions, but not philosophically, right? So, you know, analyzing artwork in this way is, I think, really, it's a really good exercise.
He's cool.
So how can listeners connect to you and your artwork?
Well, this is the age of social media. You know, we are the generation of online communication and whatnot. So I'm definitely accessible through, you know, pretty much every mode of technology: cell phone, email, FaceTime, Zoom, Instagram, Facebook, you know, YouTube, and all of the platforms that stream music, given, yes, lots of controversy and all the good things that all of the in-depth work that's happening, right, as we unpack what the role of the music, the role of the musician is in this century, and how we are deemed valuable, and how we how we are compensated. I'll just say my music is available on all streaming platforms, because I think it's important that however you as a listener chooses to have your music portable with you, I want to see how I can offer that. Yeah, everything is just under Calina Lawrence, CalinaLawrence across all platforms. And and also my website, calinalawrence.com. You can go there to keep up with what I'm up to. There's also a contact, tab, you know, if you want to reach out about any inquiries or just check in. I'm pretty accessible, and all of my information can be found online. And I'm also someone who loves to, you know, just continue to build interpersonal relationships with folks too. So on whatever level that can be, in terms of just, you know, social media friends, or if we're in the area and there's any way that I can support people in their efforts, I want to be accessible that way on a communal level too. So it's not just an extractive exchange, right? So that it's not this like inaccessible, like dehumanizing artist viewer, artist listener, right? Like we are human beings as well, with very complex lives and very intentional relationships that you know, I don't ever want to seem like you know, the ways in which we idolize musicians, that makes them feel separate from us here on the same earth. Right? And I say that because it's really easy to feel like so impressed and so encouraged and so inspired by, especially by musicians, and then seem like they're unreachable, or like they're perfect, or their lives are, you know, it can never cross paths with our life unless it's right, just through fanaticism. And so I would like to think that there have been many generations, and we are also a generation who is moving outside of that kind of celebrity disconnect, and we are focusing more again on the connection. And so the long answer, that's the long answer to how you can connect to me and my art. And and the short answer is, you know, social media and whatnot. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that at the end too, because you know, it just really shows like how we're in community with each other, and the reciprocity that, you know, sometimes gets forgotten when it comes to art. You know, being an artist as well, you know, if it wasn't for my supporters really filling my cup every day, you know, it would kind of feel like really hard, and invalidated, but they do. So, they should have a part of me as I have in them. So yeah, I really respect that. And thank you so much. I really appreciate your insight. I appreciate your artwork. I appreciate the relations you have with everybody, and your, how you're so in community and how you're so uplifting and vulnerable. Like, you are so important to our people today. And I'm so honored that I was able to get you to come on the show and talk art and philosophy. Thank you for listeners and supporting this podcast. Thank you for Ken for asking me to guest host. It's been an honor and a privilege. And I could talk to Calina, I swear to God, for hours. And I feel like there's so much more to be said. And so this will be a continuous conversation. I'd love to hear some insights that people have from this episode, and reach out to me and Calina on the social media and wherever you can find us. We both have websites, and we both would love to hear from you all. Hot
slachel, hawadub chalap. Thank you so much. Thank you, Paige.
Good. How's Paz's love suit? Shabitsi Chad.
Chad.
Boy.
We are the spark, we are the flame. I feel a change gon' come today. We went out to the shade. We are the way, we are the way. We are the way to something greater. We are the way to something greater.
Yeah, fire and water are teachers of care. Patience is found in the earth and the air. At some point we lost sight of basics, kept taking, we gave in to ego and ended up here. Money and power, our teachers agree, but we won't put profit in front of our needs. Hear us or steer us each time that we plead, but we welcome the lessons, we're ready to lead. We'll be cultivating our acres, we'll be giving food to our neighbors, we'll be supporting all the art makers. We are all relations, and we're healing through these layers. We are the way. Keep dancing. We are the way. Keep dreaming. We are the way. Keep drawing. We are the way. Keep on singing. We are the way. Keep learning. We are the way. Living. We are the way. Loving. We are the way. The way.
We are the spark. We are the flame.
We are the flame.
I feel a change gon' come today. We went out to let it stray.
Let it stray.
We are the way, we are the way.
We are the way.
We are the way to something greater. We are the way to something greater.
Change comes when we learn from reflection, and we open our minds to every hard question. Like, why are there humans in cages and streets? Why do our children have low self-esteem? Why is it normal for men to mistreat and then cover it up using threats and deceit? When will trans people live past 35? When can our two-spirit loved ones revive? When do our elders get to retire from raising grandbabies at age 59? How will we heal all the hearts of the parents? How will we reach every orphan's hand? Will we remember those days in the village and rematriate our connection to land? Isn't slave labor outdated, outrageous? Do we see how courageous our rage is? Trust the youth and embrace all the stages to free us from these colonial cages.
We are the
Keep
way.
dancing.
We are the
Keep
way.
dreaming.
We are the
Keep
way.
drawing.
We are the way.
Keep on singing.
We are the
Keep
way.
learning.
We are the way.
Living.
We are the way.
Loving.
We are the way.
The way.
We are the spark. We are the flame.
We are the flame.
I feel a change gon' come today. We went out to let it stray.
Let it stray.
We are the way. We are the way.
All the way.
We are the way to something greater. We are the way to something greater.